Hello and welcome to another edition of Razorwire. Today is the first part of a two-parter. For this first part, we're going to be sitting down with Oliver Rochford and discussing post-infosec 2024 in the UK and RSA over in the States, where we think the state of play is with the industry at large, with the vendors, with consultancies, anything that has come up from our experience in going and speaking to other infosec professionals within the field. The second part will be coming out after this, where we will expand upon that with, again, Oliver Rochford, but also we'll be bringing in Mr. Cassidy, again, to kind of add his piece to the overall thing. But for the first part, let's go in and sit down and have a chat with Oliver. It's our kind of quarterly review of what's going on. We'll pick a subject or whatever. Today, I really want to kind of look at the state of the market within InfoSec. We've had the InfoSec conference. I know you've been over in the States with was it RSA?
Yeah, it was an RSA.
Yeah. So it was RSA. So you've got some good info, obviously, for what's going on that neck of the woods. But yes, I have Oliver Rochford back again for us to figure out what the hell is going on in this market. And just to kind of set the scene before we kick off properly, we've just had Tile who've come up and said that they've been or someone's trying to extort them. We've had Snowflake, we've had Pure Storage, obviously by proxy. We've had Silence. What is going on?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's obviously a mix of things. I mean, if I look at just the adversarial activity, right, I believe that we're in this stage where for some adversaries, for some nation states, this is kind of like the pre-war phase, right? They're basically probing and they're trying to agitate as well, and we can see that very clearly. At the same time, they've caught us in to be very blunt, at a bad moment, right? We've just had COVID. We have a whole bunch of other issues going on still resulting from that. We have the whole AI hype going on as well. So this is people are distracted, people are busy. The layoffs probably haven't helped. Companies who probably believed there would be no repercussions are now finding, we can't always trace this back to that, but you can't help but wonder how much of an impact that has had. Because I don't want to say they've been breached because they let people go, but at the same time, we don't know,
Well, this is it. I mean, something you very quite rightly pointed out here. We've got runaway inflation that's just getting worse over in the States. I mean, they've just released their latest figures. And I mean, it's not looking good. I mean, just look at their credit card debt figures for the populace. It's obviously something really dramatic going on there. I mean, their property is going crazy, their credit card debt's going crazy, and no matter what the government seem to be saying, everything is fine and just carry on. I think a lot of people have suddenly realised it really isn't fine. We've got the whole social thing, that's kicking off. I don't want to go into any of that. This is not the channel for that kind of thing, but we've got to kind of see what's going on in the wider world. There's a lot of arguments, there's a lot of demonstrations for what's going on in other parts of the world where they're chucking bombs at one another. We've got artificial intelligence and everybody's, screaming and crying about that as to whether it's going to destroy us all, whether we need to be the first to do it. And I know that's one of the topics that we're probably going to talk in this particular thing. But then we've also got the potential for hot wars to kick off. I know that's one of those countries that may or may not have a red flag are really, really getting annoyed with some of the meddling going on in a place that they're currently engaged in a conflict with. And then we have the other guys who do a lot of economical building of their economy and kind of world leading in that space, who are eyeing up a small island that produces a lot of chips. And didn't they just recently surround it as an exercise, very short period of time, but it was enough to worry people. And it's inevitable that, the malicious actors and the malicious groups are going to start, I guess half of them are probably getting funded and targeted in certain directions. I mean, we don't really know what goes on that scale. We can't confirm any of it anyway, but I don't think from an infosec perspective, we're really ready for any of this stuff. As I said, at infosec, I saw a lot of vendors and a lot of people trying desperately to sell their products and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I kind of mentioned in a podcast that went recently about, I did a What Grinds My Gears podcast as a bit of a kind of light-hearted view as to where the market is. And I said, some of the marketing I'm starting to see, or have been seeing for a while, just winds me up. Things like, buy our product and DORA will go away, or ransomware will go away, or GDPR will all be fixed. And it's starting to hot up again in that space. And when I was at InfoSec, I was looking around at some of the people there. And I realized that these were some of the same people who were working for IT companies, say, sort of 9 years ago, who were poo-pooing security, but all of a sudden, because it's now a big guiding light in industry and everybody wants it and everybody needs it, and the perception is that this is the place to be as a place where you can really earn some good cash, they've all piled in. So you can tell when you're having these conversations, but I know that you have a hell of a lot more conversations with these people than I. Am I off the mark here? Am I kind of firing in the dark, or have I picked up on something that you have?
No, I think our industry has expanded. I mean, okay, layoffs aside, because we have contracted again, but overall, our industry over the past 10, 15 years has expanded massively. And a lot of the people who come into it probably don't have the same kind of mindset or background as the people who started, right? When we went into this, it was the stepchild in most companies. I'll be honest. Most companies kind of really didn't take note of you until something happened. And that's still sometimes the case, but more people are aware of it now. And as you mentioned, it's a huge industry. And of course, what I find in the industry is we have a big divergence between people who see this as a business problem and people who see this as maybe as a national security or crime problem. And the mindset is fundamentally different. And because one of it puts it into the realm of something which I would say actually is just something where you can assess the risk on it. You don't have to look at the second and third order consequences. And that's not really true increasingly as we move into a hotter world, as competition heats up, as we old alliances break down. And you're right about the politics, because independent of where you stand, polarization is never good. It makes you susceptible, divide and conquer, and so on, which is something that we're definitely seeing on a smaller level, on a nationwide level, but also if you look at the EU on a regional level as well. And so fragmentation, I think, is never good, because it just means that we can't have a concerted effort, which we need to. The industry reflects that, if you ask me. I think one of the more interesting things recently is the whole discussion around, is there a move towards platformification in security? And I find this intriguing. We've got these giants like CrowdStrike, like Palo Alto, like Zscaler. They're all off on an acquisition spree. And indeed, with the interest rates as they are, IPO in the moment, you've got to have really good fundamentals to risk an IPO, because you need to outcompete that interest rate in returns. That's essentially what this comes down to, right? But interestingly enough, I don't think actually that it's as consolidated as people think. I see diversification. I've republished an article I wrote 2016 at Gartner called "Cambrian Explosion in Cybersecurity," because right now, what I think now is the horizontalization of security. And it makes sense, right? If you think about it, the whole argument network versus endpoint really reflects two different types of company. If I'm a manufacturing company, segmented network, industrial control systems, I can't install EDR. I need to do network monitoring. If I have a personnel company, loads of people moving around with endpoints, I want to have EDR. You're not gonna have many companies who are good at both of these and all of the other things that you have. So I think we have a very diffuse market where if you're giant, you can try to dominate a few pockets. But getting the whole shebang, if you add up all of the revenue of the top 5 or 6 platform players, it's not even 10% of the security market. And if you walk across InfoSec or RSA, all of a sudden you see this huge range of different companies coming out for API security. And what you notice is that the specialization is getting deeper. Now you have somebody who can build you a SIM on Snowflake. Someone else will build it on Databricks. Somebody else will build it on ClickHouse.
Maybe
And if
not
you think
Snowflake
about
at the moment.
maybe not so. Yeah, maybe. It's still a popular choice, right? And I think that's an entirely different topic, but it's a good joke.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I derailed you there.
No, but if you think that's a specialization, and I always like biological analogies. There's this concept called a keystone species, and a keystone species in a SOC is a SIM or an XDR. Because the large part of your work, your data and your budget goes into it. So if you own that, you have a really good position to sell people other stuff. And so if you want to upsell, cross-sell people, your network things now, you better have a SIM or data lake, because that's how you can bundle the stuff. And indeed, CrowdStrike say what? I think they said they made 300 million with logs, with the Humio acquisition last year. They're aiming at $1 billion, which is around about what Splunk are making. So if you think about it, even there, but 1 billion out of 5-6 billion, it's still only, you know what I mean? It's not like they're carving up 50%. It's not like there's only 3 or 4 manufacturers like in cars. And the reason is we lack standardization. But it does mean it's harder as an end user, as a buyer, to know what you're buying. It's getting more difficult to see through, to make buying decisions. And if you buy the wrong technology, how long are you stuck with it? Will it lead to a breach? Potentially.
Looking at the state of the vendor market and the product market and the solution markets and all the stuff that you can get sold when you go to things like infosec, I did have a couple of conversations with some listeners who recognized me at the event, and they seemed just really confused over what they were looking at. Like, and these are kind of high-end infosec people I know very well. There's 1 or 2 of them have been CISOs. They still are CISOs. It was 1 or 2 consultants from a competing company, but we get on very well. We're all in this together. And nobody, they all seem to be really confused. It's like, what is all of this? What does it mean to us? How can I buy half of this stuff? It's all massively expensive and I really don't have the budget for it. So where do I start? And some of these are really knowledgeable people. They've been around for a number of years. They're not new to the game. And as I was going around infosec, because I didn't go to RSA, but as I was going around infosec, I kind of felt the same. I kind of felt a bit lost. It's like, well, what's this company over here? I've never bloody heard of them. Okay, they've got some single pane of glass. Okay, there's some marketing material. Okay, but what does it really mean? And it was like asset discovery, which is great. But it's like, how am I going to get the budget for that? As you say, if I'm kind of running my defense in depth and my stack, I've got my endpoint security, I've got my SIEM, I've got all the various different sort of like tools that I have just to give myself a very basic baseline. I can't afford half of this stuff that they're trying to sell.
You're absolutely correct. If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, what are the main trends in cybersecurity, I'd have given you a list of 4 or 5 bullet points. If you ask me today, I think you would have to be very specific. What are we talking about? We're talking about cloud security operations. And even there, if you look at the individual categories, I mean, some people think they're gratuitous, and I think they are to a degree, because you really expect these things to be consolidated in one solution, and they will be. But, as I mentioned before we started on this, right now you're seeing a lot more companies being seeded. So investors are going out and saying, right, I'm going to take 6-7 companies, we're going to stick money in all of these, and in a year or 2, we'll see which one has got anything that works. And so far few of these are graduating to basically, what's called Series A, because you have to show strong growth fundamentals. You have to show that you have customers and adoption to be able to move to that part. You're seeing all of these very niche-y solutions, because how do you go into a market if you don't have a full-blown mature solution and you're competing against a CrowdStrike?
Oh, yeah.
How do you grab any budget from somebody like that when you can only match 10% of the RFP? You go and you solve a very specific problem and you do it brilliantly. So CrowdStrike don't do maybe a good job of, I don't know, but they still have a considerable amount of false positives, so you can build something which will reduce that. You have a large SIM cost for redundant data, so you build something, but these are only vehicles to get into the market. 2-3 years down the line, they will start expanding what they're doing. The marketing, however, is terrible, and I have this lovely trick. the way that most LLMs work is that they will take whatever you put into them and they will look into their large database to see what's similar. That's what they will base any kind of decision on. If you run it across a website, see what GPT thinks it is. So you can use GPT to do ontological classification. You can basically say, if I have these 24 technology categories and other, where does this fit? And you'll find that a company you know to be SIM comes out as SOAR. And at that point, you can, because the LLM believes it's a SOAR based on the messaging, because that's how other SOAR vendors write their messaging. And I find an interesting exercise doing competitive analysis, because all of a sudden I realized that if I run it onto my website, which I'm doing, if that's what the LLM believes, and LLMs are going to be feeding search engines, does a person believe that too? If the LLM walks away thinking I'm a SOAR and I'm not, will a person get the same takeaway? You know what I mean? So you can do these very basic tests around this to see what do other people think about it. And you're right, it's getting harder. And when you dig deeper into it, you realize a whole lot of lipstick on a pig, right? Because you can't go to market saying, well, actually, we just do this very small thing. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard, but they're under pressure too. That's the interesting thing. And some of it's from the buying side. If you go into some sales calls now, you have some CISOs saying, okay, unless you can, I can replace 2 or 3 solutions with yours, I don't want to talk to you. And so it's so it's definitely how do you bootstrap a company in that environment?
I don't know how I did, but it was 17 years ago, and it was in consultancy. Luckily, I mean, we've got our own product at the moment, which has recently gone to market, and it's seemingly doing well. There's a good space for it, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There's the CISOs are like, oh God, it's almost like they're drowning. We've got all these malicious actors, as you say, they're starting to go into a much more aggressive footing. We're seeing a lot more attacks, a lot quicker, a lot more advanced, and they're speeding up. I mean, as we were talking about, Blackbuster managed to take advantage of a Microsoft vulnerability before Microsoft had a chance to patch it, and Microsoft are pretty quick off the mark to get the worst vulnerabilities off the table. But boom, they've managed to beat them to the punch, and it's worrying. It's worrying as being an infosec professional. Hearing about these breaches and thinking, cripes, we're underfunded. We don't have an idea of what we're doing on a tooling system. Because as you say, there's a lot of companies out there selling their tools now. You can't buy all of them because you don't have the budget to buy all of them. So you have to be very laser focused on your defense in depth and how you're managing your defense in depth, covering the baselines, and then specifically targeting the areas that organization specifically is concerned about, worried about. But one of my key problems that I have at the moment is there's so many third parties now involved in every organization. How do you effectively track that? How do you effectively manage that? Just because you've got a good level of defense in depth and you pay out good money for the security for your organization, it's made up of solutions that are being fed to you from other organizations. I mean, let's look at the Pure Storage issue. That was that them pwned? No, not necessarily. Well, we haven't got all the info yet, I don't think, but it was Snowflake that was done over. But what was in that workspace? What are we talking about? No one's bloody talking to one another, and until we get the info as to what's going on, it's just going to get more and more confusing.
Yeah, because Snowflake, by the sounds of it, it was info stealer malware targeting individual users, and they didn't have MFA enabled. So they were able to access individual customer. That's what's coming out right now, which makes you wonder, because to me, there's an indicator. So is it the data science team or the security team who didn't follow best practices? And why were they out of scope? And I can tell you the data science teams, often they are out of scope. The security team doesn't really understand in detail how they're working with this kind of stuff. It's just another expansion of the attack surface into an area that security people aren't really very well versed in. And that's also interesting. Like, if you think about our mission scope, keeps expanding and it keeps expanding. At the same time, we're being asked to reduce budgets. AI is another one of these question marks. There's a paper out, I mentioned this to you earlier, called Situational Awareness for Decade Ahead. It's by one of the OpenAI security people who recently left. And they're saying 2030, we're going to basically have self-improving AI. If you're a company now, are you going to invest in a 5-year SIM project? What's that risk? Right? Or what does this mean for transformation projects? Who do you believe? And how do you invest in this climate? And how do you factor AI into, how do you price AI into what you're going to be doing in 2 to 3 years' time? Can you? And what, if you don't, what's the deficit?
Well, I mean, part of the problem with all of this is the fact that you've got one group of people saying one thing about how advanced we are or how not advanced we are. We've got another group saying we've got this set of problems. And there seems to be a big kind of scientific debate, is probably the nicest way of putting it. Some would say a full-out bloody argument between various different people. And we had our own argument, me, you, and Mr. Cassidy, over AI and what it is. You like the biology, I like the transhumanism, and he's obviously a singularitarian. So we can't. But I think one of the key things from an infosec perspective is no matter how fast this technology is moving, no matter how we're incorporating it into infosec or into various different other business sectors like building chips or doing data science or whatever it may well be, I don't feel that anybody really gives much of a stuff around the security element of this particular technology, and that's what scares the willies out of me. Because, I mean, yeah, okay, you could go out and create a beautiful AI, that's all lovely and all the rest of it, and it does everything it says on the tin, and we all get proven wrong, and it's all kind of like, that last technology that we ever really needed to build ourselves because it will start doing it itself down the line. But if we don't secure the bloody thing, it just takes one malicious actor to go, I'm just going to go in and circumvent all the security and completely screw it up and make it deliver a load of crap results, or make it do something it really shouldn't do. Or, look, some idiot's gone and stuck AI into the stock market. Well, let's just make it go crazy and start losing people money.
So I'll be honest. So I've been working with quite a few companies doing a lot of work with LLMs and Gen AI in security. And if you ask me, 18 months in, none of the core problems have been resolved. They're spending a lot of time now trying to bolt stuff on to fix issues which are inherent in the approach. And the argument is that, well, sure, it's about gibberish now, but give us 5 years. And me as a buyer, as an analyst, former buying side analyst, would say, well, come back in 5 years and show me. And so, but in reality, this jump to AGI, unless there's something in labs that we don't know about, it's not inevitable at this juncture. And especially the time zone, as we mentioned earlier, energy infrastructure, data centers, GPU, all of these are solvable. They're just engineering problems. But we struggle in the moment to differentiate what a 1 year, a 5 year, and a 20-year problem is. We're overly optimistic about how long this stuff can take. We don't realize that doing all of this in parallel would require an effort that's unparalleled outside of wartime. At the same time, we can't stop because we believe there are other countries doing the same thing. There are nations, UAE, Saudi Arabia, attracting people with energy and superclusters. China, of course, is developing massively in this area. We know the US. I mean, apparently the big topic in San Francisco right now is, where do I get energy from? Where can I build a data center where I get X amount of energy to power the cluster I want to build in 2 years? And so obviously that's the pressure point, why we can't just take a breather and step back and say, okay, why don't we take our time? But when it comes to breaches, right now, what's the damage? What really happens? If you think about it, it's a business problem. It's similar to having a bad quarter. It's similar to having a production outage. It's similar to a natural disaster in Thailand, that's where you're producing garments. And as long as it's seen that way, I don't think we're going to do much about it. The national security aspect, I don't think that is clear to most business people. Why? It hasn't been for us in a long time. It hasn't been something that we've lived. Even after COVID, you'd think it would resonate a little bit better with people, but it doesn't.
And you're absolutely right. And I think this is what scares me. I mean, you know, business people are looking obviously to generate the profit for the organizations that they work for. And that's the way it works. That's how it works in capitalist society, whether you love it or hate it or whatever. You know, that's where we are. But as we found with, you know, some of the ransomware attacks in the early days of the lockdowns that really kind of kicked things into gear, and the media was going crazy about it, about pipelines and stuff like that, you know, it kind of became clear to a lot of people that, oh, wait a minute, security is really fucking, you know, I swore there, really bloody important. And then they kind of forgot about it and went back to how it was kind of before, but with a slight more awareness, you know. A lot of these technological solutions are being put into organizations. We, you know, no longer does an organization have a data center or their own data center or computer rooms with their own servers, with their own racks, with their own this, that, and the other, and, you know, ring fence security around their institutions. We're now spread over a large, diverse set of organizations over a massive geographical location, you know. I've had customers in the past, for instance, worried about the Patriot Act and how it affects them if they use that particular vendor to supply them with, you know, data storage. You know, do they store their critical data on there? What's the what could the effect be? You know, which led to kind of an increase in the usage of encryption, and good encryption as well, which was great for the industry. But then you have to start saying, well, who actually kind of runs the encryption? Who's the key holders here? Oh, wait, it's an American company. All right, so we're back in the same bloody point as we were before. We've got DORA coming down the line, which is going to have a massive effect on you know, European financial institutions. And as you kind of mentioned earlier on, I mean, you know, I do know that there's a lot of worry going on in the European Union about whether it's all going to the far right, or whether it's going to go to the left, or people are getting annoyed and so on and so forth. There seems to be a lot of instability going on in the societies around those areas, which is having a knock-on effect to the organizations, which is having a knock-on effect to people being laid off, as you quite rightly mentioned. I mean, I was looking at some of the stats in the US of people being laid off, and I was actually looking through my connections on LinkedIn over the last week or so when I got back from infosec, and realized how many people that I knew in this industry were now looking for work because they'd just been laid off. And all recently as well. It wasn't like they'd, you know, done something wrong or decided to move on, but boom, whole swaths of people are suddenly in the infosec space looking for jobs. Well, the companies that they worked for previously still bloody exist. So what have they done? Have they downsized their infosec because they see it as expensive, which reduces their overall security, which reduces everybody's overall security, because now everybody's so tightly into web. It's like we're looking down a funnel web spider's trapdoor, and we're seeing all these webs intricately pulled together that all works, but, you know, one strand, the right strand, you yank that strand, it's going to fall apart, and it's not the spider's fault.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it right now, the truth is that the cybersecurity market is not being driven much by user needs; it's being driven by the hype cycle. And if we look at like what people actually need help with, it probably isn't Gen I right now. I'm sorry, it's too premature. It's being pushed out too early from a security perspective to help security people for sure. And the value is questionable unless you're highly skilled anyway. But we've just rediverted a whole lot of resources onto that. And in the meantime, the disconnect between the buying side and the selling side, I think, is quite great. I don't see very many people in my direct environment getting really excited about some of the Gen I features that they're seeing in their SIMs, for example. Why? It's not really solving something that they couldn't do before. If you can't query your SIM, it's a badly designed SIM. I'm sorry. If you need AI to fix that, there's probably other problems involved in that. And if your users don't know how to use your SIM, there's another problem there. I don't know what exactly it's solving in that regard, right? If you can't find how many vulnerable hosts you have in the security solution, it's a terrible security solution. But we've just rediverted a whole bunch of development resources and so on. And if you look at layoffs, the companies aren't actually saving a lot of money. They're not shrinking the workforce. They're reallocating the capital. And I find there's a very interesting case study here. SAP have just started retraining 5,000 employees. They're retraining them because Germany actually has a demographics problem. You can't just lay people off and hire 5,000 new people. Other places, you would think, okay, those 35 to 49-year-olds, they're basically invested in that old technology. We want people who invested in the new technology. Let's just swap them out. And I think that's a very different approach to it, because I think it's easier to retrain people for the most part who are knowledgeable and experts, but that's just me. That might be my German bias there. But we're seeing these large moves there generally across the industry, but they aren't being driven by user needs, by end user, by buyer needs, sellers' needs.
Where do you think we're going with this? Where do you think, if this carries on the way it's going with the confusion levels that we've been discussing, where do you think we're going to be in, say, 2 years' time? Because I can't see it changing anytime soon. I mean, you're right. Some of the stuff that you were saying there, I don't know many CISOs who give much of a stuff about AI at the moment in the marketing. I don't care. Does it do what I need it to do? I don't care whether it's got AI in it. I don't care if it's got 15 people sitting there behind on a long desk, checking everything that comes through. I don't give a stuff. Does it do what it says on the tin? Because I don't want to be one of these idiots that get talked about in the media, and I definitely don't want to be one of these poor sods who get, finger pointed by the SEC or, the bunch that are going to be looking after Dora, because I don't give a shit about any of this. I'm trying to protect an environment.
But you're right. Look, the non-tech people in my private life, they don't talk about AI. They might say, oh, there's this cool new image app, but they don't mention AI. A lot of the security people, if you go to them and say, this can prevent ransomware, that's a conversation. Saying we've got AI, this might be showing my age. Do you remember that movie Trains, Planes and Automobiles with John Candy and Steve Martin? Well, there's a scene where John Candy basically tries to sell someone on a cheap Casio watch, and he's running it across his arm like, here, Casio. That's what that reminds me of when I see the marketing. It's just really terrible. Everyone you're looking at is just like this cheap thing, and you're sort of thinking, oh God, I can't really get excited about it, because what I want it to do is solve problems. And the few people who are using it to solve problems, I'm optimistic. I think over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see stronger adoption of standards. OCSF, that kind of stuff. Not everyone. It's not going to solve everything. There's not going to be one standard. There's going to be less standard. I think that there's going to be progress being made on various problems, things like bad data is a good example, right? A company I'm working with in the moment, Auguria, they're not trying to fix detection. They're not trying to fix the SIM. They're just saying, right, we can improve the data quality. And it doesn't sound like much, but it's because we've given up on these type of problems. We just accept that you can't solve them. Because we didn't, with the last generation of technology, we might not have been able to. At the same time, of course, what I'm worried about is economics. I need these tools, but how much do they cost? As we mentioned earlier, I don't have as much money as I need. I can't buy every single tool. And so the synergies between the tools have to increase. And that's why I'm optimistic that at least some of the platform providers providing a center of gravity to plug all of this together might improve that a bit. But none of this is 10x. But iterative improvements add up. When you go through 5-6 cycles, you have 10x. Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be a lot more consolidation over the next 2 years of the big boys buying up the individual tech seed, as you say, the seed companies that are building little bits of technology and kind of pulling them all into the same thing? Because we have seen that there's 1 or 2 organizations out there, that one that we deal with, they've kind of onboarded in the last couple of years significant amount of infosec companies, vendors, under one brand, and I mean, there's been a lot of fun confusion when it comes to kind of, selling into your customers this particular product, and then all of a sudden you find out they've been taken over by somebody else, and then everybody gets confused over who's billed what to where, and we've had all that fun consolidation issues that you see, but we are starting to see sort of, these big big organizations kind of hoovering up individual technologies. I mean, look at Fortra. I mean, look at the amount of organizations they've acquired. It's quite significant. Are you thinking we're going to see a lot more of that?
I think there's going to be there's going to be the formation of quite a few large portfolio and platform providers, because it's the only way they can really grow. At the same time, there's a limit to that growth, because if we take Splunk and Cisco, for example, Splunk went into the market having quite a generalist approach, IT operations and a whole set of security use cases. Based on the examples of Symantec, EMC, RSA, IBM, McAfee in the last wave of this, 2014, 2015, you acquire a product. Now, you either acquire a product and you either start specializing towards your other products. So Splunk will get better and better at integrating with Cisco tools, or you have this autonomous group within your company that you can never integrate. And so there's a limit to how many you can integrate and get synergies. And of course, each step of specialization means that market share you've bought, you have to keep it somehow. They might start looking around in other places. If you're a Palo Alto shop, you're not going to go to the Cisco SIM. And so I think these people are trying to strengthen their stickiness within certain user profiles, within certain demographics, and that's what you're going to see an increase in. But I don't think there's going to be 3 or 4 giants like in automobiles, because a car is pretty much the same no matter where you buy it. The differences are cosmetic, right? They all get you from A to B. They all do the job. In security, the specialization is deeper. Network, identity, endpoint, everyone has a slightly different angle, because companies are different, because there's a security solution for each vertical. And so I expect there to be diversification and the formation of multiple markets with individual giants within these markets, because you can't be good at everything.
I don't know. There's a few people out there that are trying to be, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember back in the day, you had Symantec, you had Computer Associates, and any new technology that came up would just get hoovered up, and then it would either be mothballed because they didn't want to sell it, they just wanted to buy that market share and not put the technology out and resell them their own stuff, or it got badly incorporated into something, or I remember, a whole set of firewalls, some of the best firewalls I've ever dealt with, and I've dealt with a lot of firewalls over the years, that got hoovered up by Symantec, and you never saw them again. And it was like, geez, okay, well, I'm not gonna be able to replace those when the support goes out. Then I'm gonna have to go over to something else, and it definitely won't be the bloody Symantec firewall. Sorry, Symantec, but your firewalls back then were crap. So I don't know. I mean, let's hope it gets a bit better. Let's see how the market moves. But I just worry that the malicious actors are moving so much faster than we can adapt to right now. We can't secure our environments anywhere near as quickly as they're attacking them. They're coming in from all different angles. No longer are you just worried about your own organization, but you're worried about the suppliers to your organization. I've got plenty of work at the moment in our consulting side where people are asking us to review through their supply chain, no matter what part of the supply chain it might well be, supplying networking services and technological solutions, or even supplying parts, whether or not they can get the parts in the right time scale to be able to do the delivery to their client, which may be the government, maybe somebody else. And if that supply chain dies, then how are they going to deal with it? It's those are the concerns that I have, and I must admit, InfoSec deepened the concern that there's a lot of hopium and copium being handed out to everybody from our beloved vendor side of InfoSec. I just want some consistency in message, to be honest, which is why I do this podcast.
No. Yeah, listen, as an industry, our marketing, it's awful. I think most vendors sell despite their marketing, not because of it. Yeah, but at the same time, it's going to get bewildering for the actual users, because each one of these solutions requires you to learn their terminology. right? And LLMs were supposed to fix that, but if you actually go into some of the Gen AI implementations, you still need to understand how that vendor names certain things. You can't just say, show me all of the hosts if they call it assets. And so it doesn't solve it. At that point, you have to learn a different prompt engineering approach to each tool, which kind of doesn't really resolve that problem. And so that's the challenge. If I'm only using a tool once or twice a month, how do I ever build up proficiency with it? How do I know what I'm doing as a best practice? How do I keep on top of that when I have 30, 40 tools? And I think that's a big, that complexity is the enemy of good security. And we keep ratcheting the complexity up.
Well, you know the answer to that, don't you, Oliver?
What's that?
AI.
AI. Hey, AI is the answer to everything.
Absolutely. You know, it'll work the tools for us and it'll just tell us the information that we need, and then it'll replace us and we'll all be out of jobs. You know, it's terrible the way it is, but no, it's interesting. It's I think, you know, one of the things I'd like to kind of say to the people who listen to this, and we get a big demographic of infosec people who work for organizations. We do get a fair few vendors because a lot of them keep asking to come on, and I'm trying to push some of them away a bit. But a lot of them are just saying, look, I just don't know where to begin anymore. Look at it this way. I had a really good interview with Jack Jones, who created the FAIR sort of risk framework and so on and so forth. And one of his biggest concerns, for instance, just as a part of InfoSec, is GDPR tools. Something simple as a GDPR, something simple as being able to provide you with information on how you're going to manage your infrastructure. And that some vendors, you know, once you've started using the product for a year or so, and I'm not mentioning any names here, we've seen price increases of like 200%. I'm not joking. You know, if you're a organization of any reasonable size with a decent security budget, your GRC tool could end up basically annihilating anything that you've got to do, you know, that you would normally spend on the other stuff like continuous pen testing, you know, endpoint security, you know. So then the argument then becomes, well, is it the IT department's budget that's going to come out of? Or is it going to come out of my InfoSec budget? Because they've got a bigger bloody budget than I have, and we need these tools, and I can't afford them. So, you know, and it was really a really interesting discussion. And he was absolutely right. And if we can't even get a decent quality GDPR tool for a decent price to help us just manage what's going on within our organization from a risk-based perspective, you know, from a compliance perspective, from a strategy perspective, then we're kind of scuppered before we even start.
Yeah. It is true. I mean, we've mentioned the affordability of cybersecurity before. The fact that if you ever sat down, right, and you wanted to build out your ideal SOC and you got the prices in, you'd be shocked. You'd realize
you couldn't.
Yeah. And then so at that point, obviously you're making trade-offs, and it's those trade-offs which are the challenge, especially when you don't get good information to base. You need to make informed decisions when you are calculating trade-offs.
Yeah, no, I was just about to say, and you're absolutely right. And the other thing I've seen also is like people having to cut areas from these products that they desperately need, and then finding they can't add them on at the end without a significant output in cash, which they won't have because they've already bought the products. You know, I have seen a few predatory vendors kind of saying, okay, you can have that product, no problems. And then down the line, say a year down the line, the customer goes, actually, we do need this module as well. And the vendors, salespeople are almost kind of going, oh, well, if you really need that module, there you go, you can have it for this price. Oh, well, I can't afford that. Okay, I'll drop it by 5%, but no, this, you know, other than that, the price is the price.
But that's where you can see how differently people see the world. Like on the marketing, it says platform, but on the business side, what people are thinking is lock-in. That's what a platform is. It is lock-in. And you're right. If you could trust your business partner to not ratchet up the prices later, and the current management, but if they get acquired by a private equity company down the line, you might not be able to. And that's the problem. It's not reliable and predictable. And so part of the problem, if you think about it, was what I saw at Gartner was people trying to move products just to save a few bucks. Makes sense from a business point of view. From a security point of view, sometimes it didn't, because of the disruption and having to basically move, migrate. And so that transformation itself is a cost. It shouldn't be done without good need.
Because we could go down that whole rabbit hole of, organizations driving down, procurement, because we get this quite a bit, procurement departments driving down the price of things to the point where it becomes completely useless to even bid on things, and you've got, like, pen testing, good example. There are organizations out there who will remain nameless who are now getting people from Indonesia, India, and a number of other locations where they can get really cheap pen testers to do the work, to make it cheap, because procurement people are trying to make things as cheap as possible, which is part of what the KPIs are. But it means, from a security standpoint, looking at that, well, if that guy in Indonesia can earn £150,000 by not reporting the vulnerability to the organization he's just founded in, and sell it on the dark web to an access broker for 150,000, and he was only paid, like, I don't know, 70 quid for finding it. Well, what's he going to do?
And you don't know who. So as I mentioned to you, we've had these North Korean nation state people trying to get jobs at companies. Yeah, so you've got people applying, as I mentioned, you've got people applying on LinkedIn to a job ad, and the people coming in are not the people who did the job ad. You dig into the companies and you see this network of people where they've created an artificial network, because they're all connected to one another. And doing some digging, you find out that North Korea is getting people to do the jobs to get foreign currency. So who's vetting them? And then you're right. It's hard to trust and rely on that. It is, for sure. There's another liability.
Yeah. Now we have to start vetting employees to a deeper level. See, this is a good example as a good sort of final point as to, if you're a non-infosec person watching this video and trying to understand a bit more about infosec and the views of infosec, this is just the type of thing, as Oliver just said. It wasn't necessarily a concern or a problem a couple of years ago. Now it's a real serious concern and problem because of what's going on in the world. Now your infosec people have to work with your HR people to be able to spot this kind of thing, because you don't want a malicious insider in your organization. You don't want somebody from an unfriendly nation state getting into your AI company. Let's use one of them because that's the big buzzword at the moment. Your AI company, learning all your secrets and incorporating all kinds of weird and wonderful things within your network, because you're building your beautiful AI that will go to market and earn your shareholders millions upon billions. Well, it's all going to come crashing down when that insider nicks your IP and then introduces some code problems into it, which makes it go crazy and die. And that's not. There is technical security, defense in depth you've got to consider there, but there's also just a simple thing of being able to spot.
And the thing is, for some people it might sound hyperbolic, but it's not. I keep telling people, I do not know any other industry where they let people like us, because I'm an engineer by background, loose on nation state spies and hardened criminals. It doesn't normally happen. You have specialist people dealing with that, but we do. And when you see what we're seeing, without knowing what is going on a physical level, the government has far more data sources. We only have digital intelligence. They have physical intelligence. They have, They have human intelligence. We only have this one thing. The bit we're seeing, it is ramping up. It is sophisticated, and it is persistent. And a lot of it's IP theft. A lot of it is probing. A lot of it is trying to find backdoors or weaknesses. It's full spectrum.
And a concern if you're a service provider providing services to organizations who provide services to government institutions or big weapons manufacturers or that kind of thing. And it's part of that supply chain stuff. This is all big, or should be sort of big, within your viewpoint, if you are an infosec professional and you're looking at your organization, you've got to consider all of this kind of stuff. So cut your security guys some slack, people who aren't in infosec, if you're watching this, because it's a bloody hard job to try and remember all of this, let alone handle it.
I also think it's another, we talk a lot about, so this is a chance to get someone on the team who might have a slightly non-technical background, somebody who might have a little bit more law enforcement, maybe a little bit of politics or something like that, because that's increasingly becoming important. Yeah, it has to be said. If you're a larger team, not on a small team, of course, if you're a larger team, or hire someone with that specialist knowledge, but it's definitely, you may not think that you're important, and that might be true on a scale of things, but who you're connected to might be.
Absolutely. And on that note, we come to the end. Oliver, thank you ever so much for sitting down and talking about the infosec market. Your insight is always welcome. You've got a far more view of what's going on behind the scenes than I have on that state. I look at it from a practicing infosec professional, but you're far more well informed than I ever will be on this space. So it's always a pleasure to have you there. And thank you for listening or even watching the latest edition of Razorwire. It's always good to get feedback. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to us via LinkedIn or through our website, www.razorthorn.com. If you feel that there's something that we should cover maybe a little bit more in depth, a new topic, or something of interest to you or the community at large, we'll even do interviews. If you've got any recommendations or you want us to interview people, we'll reach out to those individuals and see if we can get them on camera so we can ask them the important questions about infosec. So it'd be great to see what your feedback is. In addition, I do have a book recently come out, the Cyber Sentinels Handbook, a primer for information security professionals. Now, this book is very much geared up towards professionals at all levels of their career, be they starters, be they newcomers, be they people who've been in it for a little while and maybe looking for a little bit more direction, albeit the older ones looking to maybe reground themselves in some of the more important aspects of the trade that maybe they've forgotten over time. I've had lots of good feedback from a lot of different readers of a lot of different levels, so please feel free to get yourselves a copy. We've got the e-copy, we've also got the paperback copy, and if you don't want to spend any money, you can go on Kindle Unlimited and read the book for free there as well. So thank you ever so much again. Look after yourselves, and we'll be seeing you again soon.